We've won millions, taken on the largest insurers, and backed up our reputation with big wins in the courtroom. But only one injury case matters, yours. So if you want to win, we're ready to fight for you.
Rice Law. Best advice, call Rice.
Good morning, Baltimore. It is Thursday, February 12th, and welcome into the inaugural episode of the Early Birds podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich, alongside Sam Cohn and Josh Tolentino. And this podcast is the Suns' first foray into podcasting, and we're super excited to be leading the charge on the sports end. We'll be covering everything with the Orioles, the Ravens, Baltimore sports in general. Just a quick introduction. I'm Matt Weyrich. I cover the Orioles, have been on the beat for the last 3 years, coming into year 3 right now. I'm down here in spring training. We'll dive into all of that. Chris Bassitt in just a minute. But first I want to kick it to Sam, who covers the Ravens.
I was going to say it's hilarious that our inaugural episode is both our first episode, hey, we're introducing ourselves, hey, we're going to talk about all this stuff, but it's also our first emergency podcast. So when we get into this, these are the kind of things we're going to be doing, podcasting at 9:30 at night when there's a trade. And Matt, you've had a long day. For those not watching on YouTube, there's a beautiful picture of an ocean behind you. And anyway, yes, Sam Cohn. I cover the Ravens. Joined the Sun almost exactly 3 years ago, or just over exactly 3 years ago, doing high schools. I've covered Maryland. I've covered the Olympics. I've covered the Orioles. I've covered the Ravens. Now predominantly covering the Ravens, but I've covered pretty much anything you could, any sports-related activity in Maryland.
Sam, and I don't know if I can beat that banger of an introduction towards Matt with his ocean background. I'm looking forward to joining Matt in a couple of weeks down there in Sarasota. But Josh Tolentino, the sports columnist covering all sports here at the Baltimore Sun, joined just last year, but it's already been a very exciting, thrilling, what has it been, boys, like 7 months since I started at the Baltimore Sun, both franchises in town under new leadership with Craig Albarnaz and Jesse Minter. Looking forward to diving into all of that on Early Birds twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. Check us out here. Could not be, again, more excited to dive into all of this with you guys.
Yeah, Josh, you hit it there, but that's the funny thing I feel like we talked a lot about over the last few weeks and months of starting this podcast. Like, the timing could not be better, where there's a new head coach in Baltimore, there's a new new head coach for the Ravens, new manager for the Orioles, Pete Alonso, the two teams that had rough stretches in 2025 for different reasons and could potentially be on the upswing in 2026. So the timing of us doing this is exciting for sure.
Plenty to talk about with both teams. And as you mentioned, this is basically an emergency podcast because the Orioles went out and signed Chris Bassitt late Tuesday night. We were recording here just about an hour after the news broke. So how about we jump right in? $18.5 million is what it took to bring Chris Bassitt to Baltimore on a 1-year deal. The Orioles didn't go out and get an ace this offseason, but they do kind of finish here with Chris Bassitt, Shane Baz, and Zach Eflin as their offseason additions to pad the rotation. Josh, you've written a lot about the Orioles' lack of moves to this point, particularly in the rotation. Where do you feel like this move brings the Orioles' rotation now heading into the bulk of spring training?
Yeah, Matt, I still think there's a lot of unknown given the injuries that main guys are coming off from last season. You know, you also think about Trevor Rogers and his dominant stretch. Can he continue that into this new 2026 season under Craig Albarnaz? But focusing primarily on Chris Bassitt. I mean, he's a solid, I wouldn't even say top of the rotation guy that, this club was searching for in Mike Elias and David Rubenstein, his second offseason as the club's controlling owner. But he does bring stability. He's a big innings eater. That was a frequent phrase tossed around amongst ourselves when the news broke. And again, durability. You look at his last 4 seasons, Matt, over 30 starts, owns a sub 3.8 ERA during that stretch. And, his $18.5 million salary, I think that ranks third or second on the team for this season. And as you put out earlier, Matt, this team now is about to set a franchise record in opening payroll. Still, I think there's a lot to be desired. The fact that it's only a 1-year deal shows and underlines the fact that, again, Mike Elias and the Orioles front office, they weren't able to land that ace that many fans were hopeful for. Not only that, but they essentially kind of hinted or promised in a way that they had the payroll space for, rather. But welcome to Baltimore, Chris Bassitt, and certainly, again, an innings eater, durability. He's got familiarity in the AL East, and at this point, he's a fine consolation prize, as I wrote in our instant analysis, which you can find on BaltimoreSun.com.
Yeah, Josh touched on it there, but I think putting the name aside, putting the move aside, like when you just kind of take a step back and look at from an organizational perspective, Josh mentioned it, and Matt, you put this on Twitter, like they set a franchise record for their opening day payroll. That's something that has been talked about and written about. It's over and over and over again. People talk about like, okay, the Orioles keep saying, especially now under this new ownership with the new era, they're going to spend some money. Oh, they're going to spend some money. And they finally did it. And they did more than just make one big splash in free agency with Pete Alonso. They put their money where their mouth is. And I think that says a lot about where the organization is at and where the organization is headed. After all that talk, they're finally doing it.
Yeah, I look at these moves, and I don't think you can just look at the Chris Bassitt move and say he's not an ace and be mad about it. I think you have to look at it in the context of the three pitchers that they brought in this offseason with Boz and Eflin. Boz is an upside play, not a guy who has put it all together yet, but a top 100 prospect who clearly has filthy stuff. Got to see him pitch today on the field. I mean, it explodes out of his hand. His breaking stuff's nasty. If he can put it together, now getting away from Steinbrenner Field, pitching with the Orioles pitching staff, maybe they can unlock him. Great. But what really, I think you kind of have to look at together is Eflin and Bassitt. Bassitt gives you the innings. The Orioles only had two starters coming into spring with over 140 innings last year, and that was Boz and that was Dean Kramer, neither of which were pitching at an ace level, kind of stretch. We've seen that from Zach Eflin before. We've seen him get Cy Young votes in the past. He just hasn't necessarily been able to stay healthy. He's coming off of August back surgery, probably. He expects to have a normal spring, so we'll see if he does pitch a full season, but certainly with his injury history, you're not necessarily counting on him to get you 200 innings, but you can count on Bassitt to give you the volume and a guy like Eflin maybe to give you the frontline caliber pitching when he's healthy. So between the two of them together, I do think that these are the two components that this rotation was missing. Now it's just a question of whether they're going to regret missing one of these top guys who could have given them both in one package.
Yeah, and to continue from what Sam loves to reference, Eric DaCosta, the Ravens general manager, referencing the defensive backs that he loves to draft, as these exotic cars. If Ranger Suarez and Framber Valdez, if they're the Lamborghinis of the world, Chris Bassitt, he's like what, a Lexus, a BMW. He's proven it. He's been, I believe this is going to be his 12th year in MLB. He's got the experience across the AL East division, pitching in these ballparks, and I'm excited to see him down in Sarasota. And one thing that, this stays within the rotation, Matt, but I want to hear more about Shane Baz and just exactly what you heard and observed from him on the first day of spring training. Again, what a perfect time for early birds to drop the morning of Chris Bassitt signing with the Orioles and just one day after pitchers and catchers report, which, Matt, you've alluded to this in your reporting over the past couple weeks on what are the Orioles going to do with their rotation, but I don't think it's too late for Bassitt. If they were gonna add another starter after missing out on that top tier, what a way to welcome him in here. Not even 1-2 days into the start of camp.
And this was the thing that everyone said had to happen at some point soon, right? Is they have to go get a pitcher, and if they don't, it's like, is it Framber or bust? Did they do enough? Does it move the needle? And I'm curious to ask you guys, does a move like this move the needle for you in terms of where you feel like the ceiling for this Orioles team is? But yeah, like Josh said, I love to make the comparison about Eric DaCosta said before last year's draft, he's like, I'm not going to tell you where we're looking in the draft. I'm not going to spill any state secrets, but I'll tell you that we're probably going to get a defensive back because defensive backs are like sports cars and they break down really easily. And that's what the Orioles dealt with in their rotation last year. And it's just the kind of position where you can never really have enough. And you have to backload, you have to backfill, you have to get more because you have to plan and expect that those kinds of things are going to happen. So I guess, again, my question to you guys is, do you feel like, the Orioles were a team that I think a lot of projections have them near the bottom of the AL East, middle to bottom of the AL East, so obviously a really, really tough division, the toughest in baseball. Does this move the needle for you?
Well, since we're talking about sports cars, to be clear, I'd probably classify Bassitt as more of like a Toyota RAV4. Dependable, durable. Maybe you can go rugged with it a little bit, but not necessarily super flashy. Yeah, exactly.
He's had a couple seasons with some side votes. You can upgrade him to that Lexus tier,
sure.
RX, LX up there. But no, to your point, very durable, and especially these past 4 seasons is what I've been primarily paying attention to since this news broke, Matt. But come on over. We need these innings.
Definitely need the innings. And to answer your question, Sam, I think it doesn't necessarily, to me, raise the ceiling of what this team can be, because I do think that if you look at the guys that they have in their rotation, there's plenty of upside. The ceiling is there. It's a question of whether they can put it all together and do it over, the course of a full season. And that's where I feel like you kind of get some security now with Chris Bassitt. And rather than maybe raising their ceiling, I think it really raises their floor a little bit more and makes me less concerned that they're going to fall short of a wild card spot. I mean, you look at the American League East right now, it really does feel like anyone's game. I mean, I would say the Blue Jays are probably a tier above everybody else right now after the offseason that they had coupled with their World Series run. But at the same time, it's the AL East. These guys are going to pummel each other all season long. We just saw the Toronto Blue Jays go from worst to first just last year. Orioles are now trying to do that themselves. I do think that the Bassitt move, though, keeps them firmly in the mix. I think puts them above the Red Sox for the number 3 team in the division, certainly nipping at the heels of the Yankees as well.
Can we take a step back? Obviously, Chris Bassitt's the news of the day. Matt, you've had a long day. Again, we're recording this at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. You landed in Florida yesterday, and you've probably been working more than a 12, 13-hour day. Just take us through your first day of spring training, what you saw, what you learned, what interested you. Slow news day, huh?
Slow news day indeed. It got started early today. So just to give fans kind of a little rundown of what the day looks like. Orioles reporters get to the ballpark around 8 a.m. We go into the clubhouse, first time of the season. We have an hour in the clubhouse to talk to guys. We grab several names. Trevor Rogers, Shane Baz was in there. We talked to a couple of other guys. Names are Adley Rushman. Names aren't coming off the top of my head, but we talked to 6 guys in the clubhouse. Then we go out. Elias and Albernaz both held their introductory press conferences for the year. And then we kind of get to walk around the complex, which, as I wrote about earlier this week, they had a bunch of renovations, $23 million they put into their renovations that they all did in 1 year, mind you. So you look at the Orioles spending record payroll this year. They also put $23 million into this project to renovate, really overhaul their entire spring training complex. It looks incredible. I have to say they did really good work there.
What did Elias say? It's the finest facility in the world?
The finest hitting lab in the world, or hitting facility in the world. And certainly I think one of the best spring training facilities now across baseball. But after that we walk around.
How do you quantify that? How do you know that?
Well,
no, I'm serious. I'm sure it's beautiful. I haven't sine it. I haven't seen it, and I know you saw it up close and personal and took a lot of pictures. How do you figure out if it's the nicest in the world? I'm sure it's lovely.
I think the hitting aviatory, I think they called it. It's like all of these indoor batting cages with all this technology. They have a pitching and hitting lab that has force plates on the ground that measure, all of the different, how your weight's being distributed and things like that, biomechanics, and also 37 cameras all around them that are capturing every single angle to be able to paint a complete data picture of what these guys are doing. So they're talking about, as soon as they draft players, they're going to immediately bring them to that lab and put them through there and get every bit of reading they can on these guys, and they know exactly what they want to work on them with. So it is pretty crazy, the amount of detail that was put into this thing. So I believe him when he says it.
Is it air conditioned, Matt?
It is climate controlled. That was another thing.
Oh man, how are guys going to get their spring training tan, man?
That's what Craig Albin has actually been saying. Like, I got to force these guys to get outside because they're going to get too comfortable indoors. And we play baseball outside predominantly, so can't let them get too comfortable in the dome feeling, as we've seen some NFL teams do from time to time. But Going back to today, walk around and watch all of the different drills and things like that. They had agility drills today. There was a big team meeting, the first team meeting that Craig Albernaz held as manager. All but just a handful of players have reported, almost the entire team. So it was pretty full out on the back fields. You walk around all the different fields and see what guys are doing. Saw Pete Alonso getting work in at first base. Some stretching being done by Tyler Wells running around. PFPs, some infield defense work. And then the true highlight of the day is always the live bullpens, which is when pitchers come in and face live hitters. We saw Shane Baz and Dean Kramer throw live bullpens today against a lineup that included Pete Alonso, Jeremiah Jackson, Dylan Beavers, and Luis Vasquez. So got to see Shane Baz versus Pete Alonso. One was a fly ball out to the warning track, and one was a nasty strikeout. So certainly I think the win goes to Baz right off the bat. But really a crazy day from start to finish. And we also had some big news on the injury front.
I was going to say Chris Bassitt took over the headline of our show, but if you asked us an hour or two ago, then Jackson Holliday was going to be the front runner. Yeah, coming in, that was our entire show rundown, so that got torn up really quickly. But Jackson Holliday suffered a broken hamate bone in his right hand. That was back on Friday during a live bullpen session. Now, that's not getting hit in the hand, to be clear. That happens on a swing. And it's an injury that now has impacted three stars across the league: Francisco Lindor of the New York Mets and Corbin Carroll of the Arizona Diamondbacks, all being announced today that they'd be undergoing surgery for broken hamate bones. Holliday will not be ready for the start of opening day, and here is Mike Elias and what he had to say about it earlier this morning.
So it's a pretty common baseball injury. For a very long time, happens to hitters a lot, and it's nothing concerning long term, but he's going to miss some time, won't be ready for opening day, and hopefully his return is measured in weeks after that, but you're not going to see much of him here in Sarasota.
So obviously not good news for the Orioles, and the question now becomes, one, who starts at second base? There was also an injury update on Jordan Westburg. He's been slow played so far with an obliques injury. They didn't say if it was a strain or anything like that, but he apparently has turned a corner, only expected to miss a couple of Grapefruit League games. Now, he's coming off of a pretty injury-plagued year, so obviously there is some concern there. But as of right now, expect to be ready for opening day. So what the Orioles do at second base is now kind of up in the air. Blaze Alexander, they went and traded for last week. And I will say, they traded for Blaze Alexander, according to Mike Elias, one day before Jackson Holliday got hurt. So they actually got pretty lucky with the timing of that. They didn't give up any leverage there, hiding that injury or anything like that. So Blaze Alexander, probably the favorite, but also we could see Jordan Westburg switch over to second base and then Kobe Mayo play at third. Josh, you wrote about Kobe Mayo and the predicament that he faced at first base with Pete Alonso coming in and Ryan Mountcastle still in town. But now maybe there's some playing time at third.
And let's give a friendly tip of the cap to our good friend Jacob Calvin Meyer. All these flood of tweets coming through Mike Elias's press conference, and shout out to JCM, just getting those fast fingers on the keyboard. He was the first person that I read that Mike Elias noted that the Orioles acquired Blaze Alexander before the Jackson Holliday injury. And primarily back to your question on Kobe Mayo, basically my working headline that published on BaltimoreSun.com, Matt, is that his future looks uncertain as ever after the team tendered Mountie and then also went out and gave this record-breaking contract to Pete Alonso, who has not missed a game in over 2 years. So where does Kobe Mayo fit exactly? Sometimes things just work out themselves with this injury picture, and you hope for the best with Jordan Westburg. I saw some videos today of him working out on those backfields, that facility that you mentioned. A 40-yard field, by the way. Are you ready to do a 40-yard dash when I get down there, Matt?
Anytime.
But yeah, no. So Jordan saw Westy on those fields. So you hope for the best for his health situation. But maybe Kobe Mayo goes back to his old spot. Certainly, Mike Elias pointed that they were going to test him in different spots outside of first base, corner spots in the outfield. But again, this all kind of solves itself naturally with the injury picture, and maybe he does go back to third. And his defense wasn't particularly clean, as you and I have discussed there. So they've got about a month and a half to work on that, and also for Westy to get healthy.
The injury news did not stop there. Reliever Colin Selby also dealing with some shoulder inflammation. I think the thing to remember, maybe the obvious thing, is a lot of this is short term, especially a guy like Jackson Holliday. So what should fans' concern level be at this point about these injuries?
Yeah, I mean, the Jackson Holliday one, to go back to that, I think is the large concern, and not just because he's not going to be ready for opening day. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to cover some starts there, perhaps the whole first month of the season, if not longer. But really, the question is about his power. The hamate bone, and showing for those who are watching on YouTube, is a hook-shaped bone right beneath your thumb that really helps with your grip of the bat. And if you break that bone, it's kind of like a tricky bone to heal. And when you're gripping the bat, you really just have to wait until your hand is kind of ready to do it. And even when you are ready to grip the bat again and make regular swings, there is a notable decline for a lot of guys who come back from it in their power early on in their returns, and it takes a while to kind of get that back. So this was a really important season for Jackson Holliday, who really was looking to take a step forward after kind of getting a chance to run with the leadoff spot last year, and really his first full season at the major league level. Now we're not really going to get to see what a full-fledged Jackson Holliday looks like, maybe until the second half.
Okay, now stand up and demonstrate. Do you have a bat there at the Baltimore Sun house?
Honestly, I should.
For those on YouTube, can you just kind of show us like what that looks like, where it hurts, how it goes through? Yeah.
I need to maybe steal me one of those from the ballpark. I was almost grabbed a baseball today. One came whizzing by a couple of reporters' heads and thought about running after it, but I wasn't that desperate. Not yet.
A very common injury, though, amongst baseball players and golfers. Brian DeChambeau, just a couple years ago, dealing with that same injury, had the exact same surgery, also, I believe, on his left hand. So with gripping and with power, and as you pointed out to Matt, we'll have to see exactly how long it takes Jackson Holliday to get back to 100%. Were there any other notable injury news? Any other notable injury news that came out of your first day down there at Sarasota?
No, Sam mentioned Colin Selby, going to be out. He'll start the season on the injured list. That obviously leaves another spot open in the bullpen that could kind of be up for grabs. Selby maybe on the bubble coming into camp, but after they traded Cade Stroud for Blaze Alexander, there is certainly plenty of room for NRI guys to make the case to make this team. So very interested to see how it goes. But no, that was about it from the injury standpoint. After that, it was really how Shane Baz and Dean Kramer looked. Dean Kramer already kind of built up a little bit because he's going to be pitching for Team Israel in the WBC. So he threw 2 innings, which is a pretty rare sight for the first day of spring training. But I think we're going to see that a lot with how Craig Albernaz kind of manages his team with the guys who are going to be in the WBC in mind, as they're trying to get ramped up for competitive innings, competitive games a lot quicker than the rest of the team. And then, like I talked about before, Shane Baz, he looked great. Overall, I think only really gave up 1 true hit, though Pete Alonso was kind of tracking where all the batted balls were going throughout live BP and called any ball that was hit into play a hit. And was hyping up the rest of his team. And I wrote about that for the Baltimore Sun as well. Alonso was vibes guy today. First day of camp. He doesn't even have to be here yet, technically. And Alonso is running around, signing autographs with fans, getting his teammates riled up, cracking jokes. Him and Albernaz were standing there laughing for a while before Live BP got started. So I think he's already kind of setting the tone with this Orioles team. And it's a voice that I think is going to be easy for a lot of these guys to follow.
Love that energy. I do have one more Orioles question. We have to switch over to Ravens in a minute. But Trevor Rogers said today, and he said this presumably before he knew about the Bassitt deal, that he would take the Orioles starting rotation against anyone in the league. That he felt like in Baltimore, they have the best starting rotation in baseball. Do you believe him?
I don't think I believe him. I do think that the Detroit Tigers look pretty dang good with the moves that they've made over the last few days.
Just to name
I think,
one, yeah.
The Dodgers are also up there. There's a few teams with pretty vaunted rotations. The Orioles, I do think, could get there.
You need that.
The confidence is important. And also, we'll say, while we're on the topic of Rodgers, he also was asked whether the Orioles have approached him about a long-term extension, he said they have not. He would love to talk with them. Rogers is a pending free agent. He'll be hitting free agency for the first time in his career this offseason. So that the Orioles have not approached him yet, not necessarily a sign that they're not looking to extend him yet. A lot of these things do happen in spring training, and Mike Elias has had a very busy offseason with a lot of acquisitions, and it is something that he has said that he tends to focus on more in spring than during the winter. So maybe we see that start to ramp up here in spring, but with Rogers a free agent this offseason, if he does pick up where he left off last year, he could be in for a very hefty payday next winter.
Have we gotten the first Rogers Alonso face-off, Matt, or that's still in the works?
I think that's still in the works. Yeah, we have no live BP yet for Trevor Rogers. So between him and Bradish, definitely looking forward to seeing those guys. And I think that's also a thing that comes out of this whole Chris Bassitt thing is we officially have a competition, boys, for opening day starter between Kyle Bradish and Trevor Rogers. Very interested to see how that one kind of shakes out. Obviously, Bradish with the top 4 finish in Cy Young just a couple of years ago. He's back fully healthy now. What he looks like this spring really is maybe the most important thing for this entire pitching staff. So if he does look like his former self, as sharp as his former self, I think he is probably the favorite, but I wouldn't count out Rogers yet either. All right, well, we're going to wrap there at Orioles. I think that was fun to run through that entire first day. We've been talking in the present tense this entire time. I will say all of our listeners probably listening on Thursday morning, so apologies for that. We'll make sure to get our tenses down moving forward. But let's go ahead and switch over to Ravens and talk about this new coaching staff that has finally come together.
What if you settle your accident case too soon, only to realize you left thousands, even millions on the table? At Rice Law, we fight for every dollar you deserve. Don't settle for less. Get the right lawyer right now.
Rice Law. Best advice, call Rice.
If you would like what you're hearing on Early Birds podcast, you should definitely sign up for the Baltimore Sun's free sports newsletter sent right to your email. We are in the locker room, the clubhouse, at practice, and at every single game, talking to our sources and observing all of this information that we put into Baltimore Sun's weekly Orioles Insider and Ravens Insider newsletters. Sign up for free at baltimoresun.com/newsletters.
Not as much news going on the Ravens side, not as hefty news, not as busy a day in the Ravens land, but we'll say obviously it's exciting that Jesse Minter has now gotten near finalizing his first NFL staff. Want to get in a lot to sort of the Jesse Minter hire. Now this is the first time the three of us are really getting a chance to talk about it, but also the rest of his staff. Jesse Minter was hired on January 22nd. He hired his offensive coordinator Declan Doyle on January 30th. A couple days after, on February 2nd, he hired his defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver. Special teams coach Anthony Levine Sr. was hired just the other night on February 10th. And those are the 4 main voices. And I think, Josh, I want to hear your thoughts just sort of broadly on those 4. But I think to me, the first thing that stood out is the 4 lead voices of the Ravens. 3 of them have direct ties, previous stints, time spent in the building. And that was a huge question when they fired John Harbaugh to say, okay, this is a guy who has embodied and lived every single day what it is to be a Raven and to be in that building and to represent the Ravens. And what direction do they go in? How much do they stray from that? It's clear they want to stay pretty close to home, pretty close to that idea. Josh, just what are your initial thoughts looking at those four voices to lead the Ravens into this new era?
Yeah, Sam, you look at the timeline of the hires or the reported hires. I know it takes some time for the team to officially announce after reports come out on, who's coming to Baltimore. But Declan Doyle was the first major domino to fall, and certainly so many questions came after Jesse Minter tabbed him to lead this offense. He's the same age as Lamar Jackson. That's been widely pointed out. And just everyone is wondering, what is a Declan Doyle offense going to look like? And maybe that's the beauty of it all. Is certainly there's going to be a learning curve for all of these coordinators, specifically with Declan being the youngest play caller in the NFL. But that's the beauty of it, is that no one has anything primarily on tape of what he prefers. Certainly you can look at his background, his history coming through Sean Payton tree, and obviously last year with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. But again, certainly a lot of unknown, and that you point out to the other three all having ties to Baltimore. I think that is going to be much appreciated from not only this Ravens front office, but primarily the guy they put in charge, Jesse Minter. He went out and made some of his own decisions, but you dissect through them. He also was able to gather intel through this process, and that's a column that I wrote on earlier in the month, Sam, is that the Ravens, they use the coaching interview process to their advantage. So you look at who you bring in as defensive coordinator, not only a familiar name, but someone they interviewed literally for Jesse Minter's job to get not just his intel, but the 20 other candidates that they interviewed for that head coaching position. But, as you concentrate on this entire operation moving forward, it's about continuity. And, Jesse Minter, he referenced the Ravens way in his very first time speaking as a member of the Baltimore Ravens as their head coach. So the Raven way, but also he's got to identify and establish his own way as he navigates these waters.
And that seems to be the thinking, right, is that he'll be a guy who makes this his own, but doesn't lose sight of what and who the Ravens are. I think for me, the biggest takeaway, and obviously there are going to be skeptics out there, as there should be with any new staff. They're fairly, if you want to use the word, unproven, because Jesse Minter's never been a head coach. Obviously, Anthony Weaver has been a defensive coordinator, but Declan Doyle has not been a play calling offensive coordinator. Anthony Levine Sr. has not been a special teams coordinator. They're a little bit unproven, but I still think there are a lot of reasons, and we'll get into it more, to be, I'm gonna say cautiously optimistic, cautiously very optimistic, because all signs point to these guys can succeed in the positions. It's just a matter of whether they can do it together with this group, with this team, etc. Josh, you and I talked to several folks around Jesse Minter, coaches who have coached with him, players who have played for him, who speak so highly, not necessarily just about the success they have, but about who he is and what he's able to get out of guys. And I think the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway for me was hearing people say, just something about that guy when he walks in the room feels like a different kind of energy and a different light. And he's not some rah-rah coach, but he's a guy who's going to channel his emotions to get the best out of his players. He's not Anthony Weaver, who's going to fire guys up, but he's going to articulate things in a way that players understand and are drawn toward and relate to. And I think that's really important, obviously, for a head coach. He's going to call the defensive plays. We just saw Mike McDonald win a Super Bowl that way. Granted, he was the first person to do that, but he's going to call the defensive plays. He's got Anthony Weaver, I'm going to make guys run through a freaking brick wall for me, as his defensive coordinator. The whole conversation all of last year was that the Ravens are trying to get back to being feared. If anybody's going to get them to do that schematically, it can be Jesse Minter, and energy and aura-wise, it can be Anthony Weaver. Then you look at Declan Doyle. Josh, you mentioned he's 29. He's the same age as Lamar Jackson. Of course, there are going to be people who say, are you sure you want to give this guy the keys to the offense? After everything that happened this past year, and granted, Todd Monken had a lot of success in Baltimore, but there were a lot of people who were rightfully upset about how he called games, especially down the stretch, especially late in the season. Are you sure you want to give the keys to a guy who's 29 who's never done this? The other side of that is, and I think a lot of people have shared, Jory Epstein wrote a great story on yahoo.com that shared a little bit of insight, talking to several people who have said that he's prepared himself for this his entire career. And there was one, I have it written here somewhere, there was one, I think it was the Lions, a Lions coordinator who said that he's just another Ben Johnson, that he told Ben Johnson that Declan Doyle is just another Ben Johnson. If you tell Ravens fans they're signing up, and I don't want to make the comparison or draw that line too quickly, but if you tell Ravens fans they're signing up for another Ben Johnson, I think they'd be happy to hear that. And then Anthony Levine Sr., again, we talk about what special teams has been under John Harbaugh, specifically Chris Horton, a lot of success. And that's been a staple of what they do. And it's been really important in Baltimore, and it's not as important in other teams. Other teams don't think about special teams the way that Baltimore has historically, with a former special teams coach as their coach of the last 18 years. Anthony Levine Sr. built a decade-long football career as a special teams guy, and he's going to bring that same energy. Jesse Minter said it in a statement, like that's going to defined who he was as a player. It's going to define who he is as a coach. So there are going to be skeptics, there are going to be concerns, there are going to be worries about, can this group capitalize on a championship window quickly? Same thing happened with Mike Macdonald. People are not so sure you can win that quickly. But look at the two teams who just played in the Super Bowl. Obviously, Mike Vrabel has more head coaching experience, but I think there are reasons to be cautiously very optimistic about what's being built in Baltimore if they can put the right pieces in the right places.
Sam, you referenced Jesse Minter's statements on all of these coaches that he's bringing in, the coordinators that he's bringing in. You know, in today's world of Photoshop, where, you know, coaches are hired and they're Photoshopped, you know, with team gear, the Ravens didn't have to do that with 3 of the 4 main guys that they hired. You know, Jesse Minter, obviously, we've well-documented history in his time in Baltimore, but Anthony Weaver and Anthony Levine, I've really enjoyed the fact that they have videos of these guys speaking to teams in past practices. And just you talked about the energy that Anthony Weaver is going to bring into a room. I mean, certainly we're going to hear more of it. We're going to hear Anthony Levine's voice a whole lot more. But the fact that they have archived video of these guys to be able to roll out these announcements, I think that's an underappreciated fact as we speak to the continuity of Jesse Minter, again, identifying and trying to pave his own path as he goes on this coaching journey, but to have familiarity with guys who've done it before. And the fact that, again, those 2 vocal guys who, yeah, Jesse Minter is not a yeller, and we've learned that through guys that we've spoken with, players he's worked with in the past, coaches that he's worked with in the past, but he gets that oomph, that needed oomph in the room from those guys that he's brought in and promoted in Levine.
One more thing that's really impressed me, just again to take a step back with Jesse Minter, and you know, he was hired a few weeks ago. There's been a lot of talk about what he is and what he can be, but his ability to shape shift who he is and what he's done to different places and different staffs, to me, is really impressive. One thing, PJ Volker, who was the defensive coordinator at Navy and has since been hired to Jesse's staff, PJ and Jesse were lifelong best friends, played football together in college, coached together, coming up the ranks together. They were in each other's wedding parties. PJ said that one thing that really impresses to him about Jesse is his ability to, at each stop, he essentially started from quote-unquote ground zero. He built a defense at Indiana State, of course with the help of guys around him, but built a defense that worked. He goes to Georgia State, he does it again, building a new defense from scratch. He gets to Baltimore, and one thing that PJ said is there was a lot of leftover language from previous coordinators. And there was a group effort between Wink Martindale and Mike Macdonald and Jesse Minter to, again, build something from scratch and learn something new and take something new. And Jesse likes to say that his time at Baltimore was like a master's course. He takes that to Vanderbilt and he does something different and something new. And then he goes to Michigan, and then he goes to the Chargers, and he's had success at a lot of these stops in different ways, trying something new. And a lot of the people we talked to said a lot of that is because his ability to say, someone else in the room might know something that I don't. Let's have a conversation. He can delegate. He can learn from other guys. And that collective, like, that's what I think can work. That's why I look at someone like Jesse Minter and say, sure, he's a first-year head coach, but those are all the traits that are going to work. He's not just some guy who's going to win the press conference and convince fans on day one. It's someone who has the qualities and traits to have success, whether it's in the short term or long term, it remains to be seen. But I think, to me, that was the biggest sticking point.
And, you know, I think that some fans might look at these hires and be like, what was the point of firing John Harbaugh if we're bringing in a bunch of his disciples? And that point is well taken. These are guys that have been working under him. But I think, honestly, like, when you are a team like the Ravens, and Steve Bisciotti was asked this in his press conference, like, are you telling your next head coach, whoever this is, that they have to win a Super Bowl right away? Because that's the standard here. That's the reason that they moved on from John Harbaugh is not just because they missed the playoffs this year. It's because they haven't won a Super Bowl in God knows how long. So when you go and you bring in these guys who have coached under him, I understand that there is some concern there. But I think that when you bring in younger coaches who worked under a guy like Harbaugh, you know, they saw the standard. They were able to absorb what they were, but they're also still malleable. They're still guys who are evolving as coaches. If you were to do the same thing, but to grab guys who have been in the league for a long time, maybe worked under Harbaugh for a long time, and now are kind of maybe a bit more stuck in their ways, then I can see kind of where that concern might be. It's the same thing in Buffalo with Joe Brady being promoted. You know, there is continuity there, no doubt about it, but they are pulling the continuity from the areas of success in which was their offense and the rise of Josh Allen, well, not necessarily under Joe Brady, but with Joe Brady in the last few years. And now we're seeing the same thing. We're plucking from some of the best coaches from the Ravens coaching tree of the last few years, or even in instances the best players when it comes to special teams, and plugging them in to roles where they'll be able to really oversee the exact things that they already had success in Baltimore before. So I don't think that that's something that necessarily rings any alarm bells to me as to why I might be concerned about the staff.
Yeah, and to be honest, guys, like now that they have the staff in place, that was clearly the most important part as Jesse Minter gets onboarded here. That's just one piece of this huge offseason puzzle. You know, you look at the personnel and the roster that they have in place. You know, a lot of us, including myself, were touting this roster as the best in football. Mike Preston, our colleague at the Baltimore Sun, he called it, and he's covered every single year of the Ravens franchise history. He said it was the best roster in franchise history. And, you know, a couple injuries here and there, and, you know, they're 1-5. And, you know, obviously they clearly regressed these past two seasons. So a lot of work to be done. And now that they have their leaders in place, now it's about hearing Jesse Minter out. You know, what type of physical bodies do I need? What type of traits do I want in my defense? And, you know, now it's Eric DeCosta's time to get to work. You know, clearly Lamar Jackson's contract is a big issue for them to come to hopefully a quick resolution here in the next month. And then it's busy time, boys. It's obviously the scouting combine and really just bringing in the bodies in the draft class, free agency, that hopefully, again, we look at Mike McDonald and, you know, Sam, you wrote a really nice story on not just Mike McDonald, but just what the Ravens can learn from the Seahawks and also the Patriots, the two teams that competed in this year's Super Bowl. I'm really curious, Sam, what was your biggest takeaway as you put that piece together as Jesse Minter embarks here in Baltimore?
There's a couple you could sift through, but the biggest one is the cheddar. Go spend some freaking money. If they don't, they're like, how do you expect to compete? Granted, they have a great roster, they have a lot of great players. How do you expect to get over the hump if you don't spend some money? The obvious way, and I was going through this because I wrote a similar story last year after the Eagles won the Super Bowl. It's like, okay, what can the Ravens learn for next year from an Eagles team that was just like, holy cow, the most dominant team we've seen in a while? And a lot of that was what they were able to build in different ways. And no two Super Bowl teams are necessarily the same. But the Patriots spent more money than any other team in free agency to turn around a 4-win team that didn't make the playoffs to make the Super Bowl. The Seahawks spent the fourth most in the NFL last free agency. They spent over $200 million. Half of that went to Sam Darnold and a quarterback that they certainly gambled on, but it paid off throughout the regular season and the playoffs. He didn't turn the ball over once in the playoffs. So only 4 teams in the NFL spent $200+ million. Where were the Ravens on that list? 31st. So yes, the Ravens have a lot of talent in Baltimore, but to get over that hump, and to Eric DeCosta's credit, he has said, and so is Steve Bisciotti, if they can restructure Lamar's contract, they have every intention of being active participants in free agency. He acknowledged, to his credit, that's something they haven't done, haven't been able to do, haven't done as much as they would have liked, capitalized on, signed guys, whatever. They haven't done in recent years, and they say they're going to do it again. It's the same conversation with the Orioles. It's like, you can only say it so many times. And if they do it, I do believe if they can, you know, they see their window. If they can restructure Lamar's contract, I do believe that they're true to their point, or they'll be active participants. But it's one of those things. It's like, you can only say it so many times. You got to go do it. The other thing I want to ask you guys, because we just to kind of wrap up here, we talked about the faces of what will be the Ravens coaching staff, the 4 main voices, the guys who will be answering the questions for how this season plays out. And Jesse Minter's 42. I don't really play into the he's so young because he's older than a third of the coaches in the NFL. But it is a younger staff. We mentioned Declan Doyle. Anthony Weaver's 45, so he's the oldest of the bunch. But the assistants that he's built around him, a lot of them have come from the college ranks. Does that give you guys any reservations? How do you sort of grapple with the idea of this new staff that doesn't have as much NFL experience as previous staffs have?
Yeah, certainly, Sam. It's not just for Jesse Minter, but there's going to be a learning curve for all of these coaches that he's bringing in. And to answer your question, yeah, is there a level of concern? Certainly. I mean, these aren't guys in their early 20s and their late teens that they're dealing with. I mean, you're going to have to control personalities in each of the position rooms, but I think Jesse Minter has also positioned himself to be able to navigate that with some of the other guys that he's brought in. You think about Dwayne Ledford, their new offensive line coach and run game coordinator, and all the success that he's had in Atlanta. Joe Lombardi, the former Broncos offensive coordinator, someone who has a long time familiarity with Declan Doyle and Jesse Minter. So I think they've done a fine job at balancing it. And sure, is five guys a large number to come directly from the college ranks? Sure. But I feel like, again, he's done a fine job at balancing, also bringing in experience and being able to lean on that once the bullets start flying in live game action. When Declan Doyle is drawing up a third and long call late in the fourth quarter at M&T Bank Stadium, and when all of this finally matters, is that he's going to have important and experienced voices to pair with these coaches that are coming from the college ranks.
Yeah, and also the college to the NFL pipeline has been alive and well. Like you look at MLB and Tony Vitello coming, making the jump, being the first ever to do it for Major League Baseball from the college ranks. It's something that we see in football all the time. And also, college coaches kind of have to act like GMs these days. I mean, recruiting has always been such a key part of being a college coach, but now with having to worry about contracts and guys leaving and contingency plans and promises and things like that, all of the politics that come with the state of college football, which is a complete mess in my opinion and needs to be fixed on a variety of fronts. But that's a conversation for another day. I don't think that that's necessarily something that necessarily is a red flag for a guy. It's more of what did you do? What were your success stories? And what can you kind of point to that says this translates to the NFL?
Exactly. Yeah. Just the bottom line there is that Jesse Minter, and he said this. He wants guys who are connectors and leaders. He understands and he believes and he knows that schematically and football wise, he has trust in a lot of these guys through connections that he's built in his long career, or guys in the building that he's already hired or he has connections to, connections of connections. It's a matter of he wants to build a staff of guys who, in the same way that he can, and he said this on a video the Ravens posted just a couple weeks ago, that he understands, he knows about himself. He believes that his superpower is his ability to connect with people and ability to build these relationships. And that's going to be so important for a Ravens team that's trying to rebound from missing the playoffs, from a team that entered with Super Bowl expectations, as we've documented extensively, and then missed the playoffs. Like, to rebound from something like that, to get back to what the Ravens are, you need an entire room full of guys who can get a message across in a clear and articulate way, and that's what he's trying to do with the staff.
To Sam's point, and I'm going to plug our story that we did together, Sam. You can check that out at BaltimoreSun.com, the making of Jesse Minter. Harold Etheridge, he was the opposing coordinator of Jesse Minter at Indiana State, at Georgia State, worked with him for nearly a decade. And, I didn't include this in the story, but this was a predictable outcome. We're talking about the assistant coaches that he's bringing in. Harold basically predicted that Jesse would have a handful of coaches that he brings in from the college ranks because, to Matt's point, they don't want to be dealing with the state of college football right now. And Jesse Minter is someone that they've, these guys that he's kept in touch with, he all has ties to them throughout earlier in his career. And to end on that point, this is a quote that Harold Etheridge did provide us for that story, just to, again, hammer who Jesse is as a motivator, as a leader, and certainly the group of coaches that he's bringing in here to Baltimore. Again, Harold Etheridge worked with Jesse Minter for a decade as opposing coordinators at Indiana State, Georgia State. Jesse's a player-type coach. He's energetic. He's detailed. Guys love playing for him because he's going to get the best out of you. He's not an arrogant guy. Coaching, it's all about trust. They've got to trust you. You've got to trust them. Jesse's a great teacher and motivator.
As evidenced by how distraught, maybe that's a strong word, but how excited a lot of those Chargers players were for Jesse when he got the job in Baltimore, but how sad they were to see him leave. Guys really care about him. Guys have built really strong relationships with him. And I think this team's going to be, in a lot of ways, granted, he has to go do it, but I think all signs point to him being ready for this opportunity, and that was sort of the general message, Josh, we got from several people that we talked to, is that his entire career has been building toward this. It's just a matter of, can you go do it?
And we will certainly find that out as the offseason progresses and into training camp later this summer. But for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap there. Thank you all again so much for listening to, once again, what is the inaugural episode of the Early Birds podcast, the one that we hope is the first of many. And as a reminder, it'll be coming out every Monday and Thursday morning. Josh and Sam will be joining me, kind of alternating episodes to talk Ravens, talk Orioles, talk whatever is the biggest news going on in the Baltimore sports world. Until next time, fellas, take it easy.
We've won millions, taken on the largest insurers, and backed up our reputation with big wins in the courtroom. But only one injury case matters, yours. So if you want to win, we're ready to fight for you.
Rice Law. Best advice, call Rice.